1. My mom and stepdad got married when I was 4. Mom and I moved into the house my stepdad owned after they got married. It was just the 3 of us and our animals. I'm an only child, and at the time of this story, we had 2 big dogs who lived inside and out. The dogs usually roamed outside at night on the 20 acres we owned. We lived in that house for 14 years, and I saw my fair share of creepy stuff. But this story sticks out the most. A little background. I was around 7. I don't remember the age exactly. I know I was old enough to use the bathroom at night alone, but still young enough my mom usually checked on me to make sure I got back in bed okay. I also know for sure it was Christmas Eve. Our tree was always off at night except for Christmas Eve. Our house was small, 850 square feet small, but I loved it. When you walked in the front door, you were immediately in the living room. Straight ahead was the hall. In reality, it was a small rectangle that had doors on 3 of the 4 sides. From the living room and front door, you could see into the bathroom. Heading to the bathroom, you had a closet on the left, bathroom door, my bedroom door to the right, empty wall the width of a door, and my parents' bedroom door. The kitchen was off the left of the living room and shared a wall with the bathroom closet. Super cute, just cozy. We also had an unfinished basement and the stairs in the living room by the kitchen door to the back porch. Okay, story time. I got up to use the bathroom Christmas Eve. I got up from my bed, went out my bedroom door, and turned the corner into the bathroom. I, of course, had to peek at the tree and presents underneath. I thought I saw a monster truck. At the time, I was a big fan and really wanted a remote control one. But I didn't stop to look because I really had to go. After I finished up my business, I got up and looked towards the living room. I really wanted to peek at my presents before I went back to sleep. We didn't close the door in my house growing up, unless we had people over, so I could see the front door and the glow of the tree from my seat. I looked back at the toilet to flush, and when I looked back up at the doorway between the hall and the living room, I saw the silhouette of a boy. He looked about my age from his height, but he had his back to me, so I'm not sure what his face looked like. He was standing in the doorway, using his left hand to hold the doorframe so he could lean into the living room on his tiptoes and peek at the presents. In his right hand he had a red sucker. His whole body was dark because of the lack of light and the Christmas light shining behind him. I shuffled to the edge of the bathroom, so I was just inside the doorway. If I had to put my arms straight out, I could have touched this kid. I'm standing there, about to ask him what he's doing, when he slowly drops back down to his flat feet and starts to turn to face me. As he starts to turn, I get the most intense feeling of dread, fear, and anxiety. I can see the profile of his face, and he's just smiling, staring straight ahead. Just as he's about to get all the way around, my mom walked out of her room and asked me if I'm okay. In the split second it took to look at her and back at the boy, he was gone. I instantly felt better, and it was as if he never existed. I pointed to the living room, and my mom assumed I was trying to peek at presents, so she just tucked me back into bed. I fell asleep pretty quick, and woke up and totally forgot about it the next morning. I did get my remote control monster truck that year. It was years before it came back to me, and I told my mom about it. She wasn't surprised because, like I said, a lot of weird stuff happened in that house. 2. I had a broad daylight public experience about 7 or 8 years ago at work. I was working primarily as a burn table and laser cutting table programmer and operator for a small steel supplier that also did some custom work. Customers could bring in metals and have us cut them, weld, whatever was needed. We also had materials we purchased from scrap yards that we would sort through and organize to resell as used material. It was some of this used material that I was doing some final work on that day. I don't remember why, but I had set it in the middle of the dirt road, which was one of the 2 that went through the shop and out the other side for customers and our own trucks to use while being loaded up. I had to weld a lifting eye onto the face of this used plate, and then I would pick it up with a crane for the customer to drive under for loading. This was a small company in central Arkansas, and some of our methods were questionable. As soon as I flipped my welding hood down and struck an arc, it felt and sounded like a gust of wind began hitting me about once a second. It only took a couple of gusts for me to raise my hood and look in the direction it was coming from, because it was so strong and sudden that it had surprised me. I thought maybe someone was fanning me with a big piece of cardboard or something, but there was no one around. I chalked it up to just a random wind gust blowing through the building and went back to welding. But the instant I struck an arc again, the gusts were there, hitting me so hard that they were pushing my body and the hood so that I was swaying back and forth. I stopped and flipped my hood up again, and everything was dead still. This dirt road was half pea gravel and half fine dust from so many vehicles driving over it for the last 50 years. And the yard outside, in the direction the wind was coming from, was about the same. Any time there was a gust of wind, this floury dust would roll through the shop, and you had to look the other way to keep from getting a faceful. This time, though, there wasn't a speck in the air. It was dead still. I started to feel like something really was odd at this point, so I looked around to see if I could see anyone and make eye contact with them and ask if they were seeing this, but they were too far away and looking the other direction. I decided that whatever it was, I was just going to finish my weld, and that surely it was done since I had looked around for a good while and there was no breeze to speak of. It would be too big of a coincidence if it were to start up again as soon as I started welding for the third time. But of course, that is exactly what it did. I pushed through, holding myself steady while crouched down and welding to keep the wind from making my hands unsteady, while trying to lay down a proper weld bead. For whatever reason, this wind was not blowing my welding gas away and ruining my weld. I finished the weld and then flipped my hood up very quickly to see if I could see anything out of the ordinary, but all that happened was the gusts stopping the instant I was done, and everything was dead again, not a speck of dust in the air. The impression I got was as though there was something large and winged that was blowing gusts at me with its slow, powerful wing beats. The only thing I can imagine is that maybe what I was welding on was poisonous when heated, since it was used metal with an unknown substance on it, and that maybe I had a guardian angel pushing the flames away from me as I welded. I wasn't under the influence of any drugs, no alcohol, was wide awake and doing my job in the middle of a sunny day, and these were powerful gusts. When I say they instantly started or stopped along with me welding or not, I don't mean like I started a long weld and the gusts began within a minute of it. I mean the starts and stops of the welding and gusts were within half a second each time. Has anyone heard of anything similar? 3. About 5 years ago, I worked security for a large office furniture manufacturer in Michigan. I did mainly foot and vehicle patrols of primarily the 3 factory plants, but occasionally the corporate office buildings and an older home that the company bought and refurbished. This company would use the home for tours for the public, and they would use it for some wow factor for potential buyers they flew in to make a sale. For more reference, this home was designed by a famous architect and is known for its style and large bay windows and painted glass. The home was built in the early 1900s, and as far as I'm aware, no one ever died in the home or anything like that. I worked midnight shifts, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and we had a storm rolling the night of my shift. At about 1:30 a.m., the control operator received a fire alarm fault from the fire panel at the home, and when compared to prior alarms that night and the weather we were experiencing, it was presumed that the power had gone out, and when it came back on, set off the fire alarm fault. I was dispatched as a precaution to ensure everything was okay, and to reset the fire alarm panel. I got to the home around 1:45 a.m. and made my way into the home. I'd been there a handful of other times, and fellow security guards had told me about weird occurrences that had happened around the house over the years. The main story was about them seeing the light on upstairs and a black silhouette of a figure standing in the window, watching them. There were also stories from the tour guides of the home that stated the dolls in the nursery would be found in different locations from when they last saw them, with no one else entering that room. Anyways, I made my way to the basement, which is where the fire alarm panel was located. I reset the panel and attempted to radio to the control operator to see if the fault had reset. At this time it was around 2 a.m. My radio completely refused to operate. It was making weird noises when I tried to key it up, and kept losing signal. I didn't think anything of it and pulled my phone out and called them. I was able to establish a phone call, but it kept cutting out, and it had a lot of feedback until the call finally dropped, and my phone went into SOS. I decided to do a walkthrough of the house since I was already there and wanted to kill time. I went back upstairs, walked through the kitchen into the dining room, and into the living room. The large windows noted earlier are primarily in the living room. The lights were old in the home and were operated by buttons on the walls and not switches, but I elected to just use my flashlight. I walked into the living room and did a quick once-over of the room with my flashlight. For a split second in the reflection of the bay window, I could see an old man seated in the chair, sitting less than 5 feet away from me. He was staring at me through the reflection with an eerily emotionless face. I doubled back while questioning what I just saw, but the image was burned into my mind. There was nothing. I immediately felt uneasy and paused momentarily, but elected to continue my walkthrough of the home. The staircase was beside the living room and went up to a landing about 10 feet long, which proceeded to another staircase to the second floor. I proceeded to the stairs and stepped onto the landing. I can't describe the feeling that rushed over me into words. It was like in the movies. All of the hair on my body stood up, my face went cold, as all blood rushed away, and I had an immediate sense of danger. Needless to say, I sprinted out of the home to my patrol vehicle and sped off without looking back. They pulled the video footage of me sprinting out of the house, and it was a joke for a while, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Sometimes I wonder if the people working there now were told of my weird and interesting story. I wonder if any of them ever had their own encounters or experiences. Who knows? 4. So this happened around 6 or 7 years ago, in a village in North Lincolnshire, UK. My friend Amy worked as a tattooist and piercer, and often ran the shop while the owner ran errands, etc. I often went to visit and sit with her and normally spent all day there. The shop was part of a very old row of buildings. I think there were 6 altogether, which I got told used to be a bakery in the early 1900s. You walked into the door, and to the left was the stairs up to the piercing room. Directly in front of the entrance was the till and chairs for us to sit, and behind the stairway there was a little hallway to go into another room, which had paranormal and occult items, including electrical ornaments. So this day, me and Amy decided to open a pack of angel cards and use a crystal to ask questions. We had no clue how to read the cards, but were asking questions whilst dangling the crystal on a chain. It swung around for yes, and backwards and forwards for no. Could be the other way around, I can't remember properly. We were asking if there was somebody with us, and it swung. We asked if it was male or female, and again it swung. At this point, it started to feel uneasy, and we asked if they were a good spirit, and it spun around so quick Amy dropped it. At this point there was a very loud bang upstairs in the piercing room, so we went to see, and the toilet door was shut. The door is very heavy, so propped open by a heavy box, and this box was on the other side of the room. This freaked us out, so we ran downstairs to get some fresh air, and as we were coming down the stairs, the electric demon and ghost ornaments in the other room started playing, and we checked. They weren't even plugged in. We ran out of the shop and sat on the bench opposite the front door and were very shaken up. Amy had a client, so had to go upstairs and asked me to watch the till area. So I was sat there, waiting for her to come down, and I felt so sick I had to go out of the entrance to get some air. As soon as I stepped out of that door, I felt something lift and the sickness went away. Amy was finished with her client and came outside and said she felt unwell without me saying that I didn't feel well. A couple of hours passed and Amy had no bookings, so we stayed on that bench and didn't go back into the shop. When it came time to close the shop, we went inside together and upstairs to the sterilizer to make sure all instruments were in the machine to clean, when we heard a man downstairs. We went down and there was a guy about 20 years old, very basic looking, and he was chatting away to us and said he'd been in the sweet shop next door and wanted to book in for a piercing. He asked if we were okay, and we explained what had been happening. He said he would walk us to the bus stop around the corner, which we would normally never say yes to, but were so shook up we agreed. Walking to the bus stop, and we were all talking, and once we got there, we turned to say thank you, and the guy had literally vanished. Like absolutely nowhere to be seen, and it's a very open space, so couldn't have gone anywhere in the time it took us to stop walking and turn around. During the bus ride home, me and Amy felt so sad. We ended up crying and couldn't shift the sadness we felt. Amy spoke to her boss, as he's into the occult, and asked where the crystal and angel cards were that had been left at the shop, so he took them and put them in the cupboard with a Ouija board, which was wrapped in holy cloth. And at this point, we thought that was it. That night I had the worst nightmares I've ever had. All I can remember of them now is blackness, with red dots spinning around as if they were circling me. For days after, me and Amy went from talking all day every day to the odd message, until she rang me and said her boss had looked at the outside CCTV, and there was never a man in the shop. He could see us talking and looking at something, but nobody else. The sweet shop had also closed that day, so he hadn't been there, and in our frantic states we didn't even know it was shut. Since then, we found out that the bakery from the 1900s burnt down and a mom and daughter died in the fire, but we can't figure out why there was such a dark feeling and what stayed with us for a while after. The next week, the Ouija, the cards, and crystal went missing from the cupboard. They moved shops a few weeks later, and during the move, the items never got found. 5. I've been in the process of awakening the last 6 months. Through meditation, mindfulness, and research, I formed a base understanding of how the universe functions. The 7 Hermetic Principles have been the foundation of my research, and Hemi-Sync has been the foundation of my spiritual growth. I've always been fascinated by the occult. I've visited a few psychics in my youth, read my horoscope, and believed in the concept of a spirit world, but all of it under the umbrella of proceed with caution, due to my Protestant upbringing. As an adult, I found that evangelical Christianity only worked in the sense that I felt taken care of spiritually, but taken care of by a schoolmaster constantly being reminded of my shortcomings. As a gay man, I hated myself for same-sex attraction, and I came to a point of self-abuse where I had to walk away from Christianity, as I knew it. But I know there's power in the Bible, and I know there are greater forces influencing us. We indeed wrestle not against flesh and blood, therefore I couldn't simply turn off my spiritual awareness. I followed my intuition and was eventually led to meditation. Specifically, meditating and listening to sound frequencies meant to lift your vibrations and ease anxiety. I was surprised to find out how well it worked, and began a month's worth of research leading me through the Hermetic Principles, and being introduced to Hemi-Sync via the Gateway Project. In the last couple of months, I've tuned in to what's happening around me, and have had several personal experiences with what I believe are spiritual guides advising me. They communicate through coincidences that occur when I've had a string of good meditation sessions. These guides are benevolent and constant. They're meant to be. For the first time today, however, I encountered an evil entity in my house. My mother-in-law has been staying with us, and her and I have been at odds. The details aren't important, but we have been avoiding each other. I couldn't stand to be near her room, as I felt such negative energy there. I assumed it was me just not being able to forgive her, projecting my problems to that energy. But we both forgave each other, in words, and genuinely wanted to move on, but we couldn't. We both ruminated on it. Fast forward to 3 days ago, I find a homemade Ouija board in my stepdaughter's room. I didn't think much of it, but felt prompted to tell my husband about it this morning. To which he agreed he didn't like it, but had chosen not to take it seriously. Later in the day, my stepdaughter's mom was here dropping her off, and pulled us aside, telling us we should keep an eye on her, because she found another homemade Ouija board at her house, and her other daughter had started having nightmares about a demon chasing her. accompanied by sleepwalking. I had chills. I knew instantly we had an evil entity in the house. I realized this entity had been influencing my feelings toward my mother-in-law. Strangely, I have days where I didn't think of her at all and feel at peace, only to encounter her, depressed. Then I'd have days I couldn't stop ruminating about how I don't like her, and how she would be in the best mood. My theory is that the entity bounces between the two of us, feeding on our energy like a parasite. My husband burned sage throughout the house, as my mother-in-law and I told whatever was there to leave. And that's when I felt it. Goosebumps, chills, and a sort of static pressure confronting me. I began to cry. I told it to leave, that it wasn't welcome here. My mother-in-law called me to her room, and I could tell the entity had been there a while. It was feeding on her energy. The walls oozed with its presence. I commanded it to leave, feeling the pressure shift. It was scared. They fear the living when they're found out. I talked to it as if I was scolding a child. It knows it has to go. My mother-in-law and I both had chills, but here I am talking to the ceiling, and she's looking at me with complete trust and belief. We hugged for a solid minute after. My grudge towards her seems to be gone. The energy in her room is much lighter. We've had a discussion with my stepdaughter about the boards. She seems to be taking what happened seriously. I feel empowered, and more sure than ever the spirit realm not only exists but influences our day-to-day lives so subtly, we won't realize it unless we're keen to these kinds of things. So don't let anyone tell you this stuff doesn't exist. I'm as logical and as analytical as they come, and I know what I experienced today. Don't just believe in it, friends. Know the nature of what you're dealing with, and take action if necessary. If you made it this far, thanks. Let me know if I'm full of it, because I'm convinced what happened today was real. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories 385. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. And if you'd like early access to the videos, you can get that by supporting me on my Patreon page for as little as $1 or more a month. There's a link to that in the description, as well as a link to the Hellfreezer Discord server, in addition to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, which is located on Teespring. And if you enjoyed today's video, leave a tip by clicking on the heart with the $sign underneath the video. Also, double check to make sure if you are subscribed, because some people have been getting unsubscribed lately. Well, I say lately, it's been going on for years, really. But do have a check to make sure you're getting notified when the videos are up. Okay, no other bits of business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: how much do you procrastinate when you have a simple task to do? Like if you decide, okay, before I settle for the evening, I need to run to the local store and buy something. Whether it's, something essential like bread, milk, and that sort of thing, or you just want to get snacks. You have hours to do it. So do you go right away? Or do you just enjoy lazing on the sofa for a bit and then wait until there's like 30 minutes to go, or sometimes less, hoping you make it in time? I mentioned this because I did that tonight. It was less than half an hour, one of the local stores to go. I was thinking, I'm going to want some sort of energy drink when I'm done working to sip on. I could also get some snacks as well. No, I shouldn't. I should keep working. I better go before the shops close. So, why don't you let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Paranormal Stories 383, and I think this was: if water had to be flavored with something else forever and ever, what would it be? And today's answer comes from Nova Brilliant, and their answer is lemon or grapefruit. I love bubbly, and grapefruit is my absolute flavor. I've never had bubbly, we can't get it over here, but my fiancé does tell me that it's very, very yummy. So it's one of the many things I hope to try while I'm visiting. Thank you very much for your answer, Nova Brilliant. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.